Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, July 26th, 2024. Born on this date in 1914, big band leader, trumpet player, and composer Erskine Hawkins of Birmingham. And in 1959, writer Rick Bragg of Piedmont. Today, we have reporter Ivana Harinkyu on the show to update us on her series on the paroling system in Alabama. She has a story about Roy Moore going to bat for an inmate hit with a life sentence after a shoplifting case that happened back when Moore was still Chief Justice. First, though, we have an elected mayor in New Bern, more war of words with Mexico over Vulcan Materials property there, and a former Crimson Tide football player convicted of animal cruelty. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. A United States district judge signed off on a settlement this week that'll put the winner of a mayoral election into the mayor's office after he was kept out of the office for 4 years, reports AL.com's Elena Bookman. The lawsuit at hand, said the town of New Bern, population 133, back in 2020, has not held regular elections for decades, and mayors and council members have been appointed by those already in power. It also alleged discrimination because the old guard was white, while the elected mayor, Patrick Braxton, is black. Braxton will be inaugurated August 3rd. He'll run for re-election in the city's first real election in decades next year. U.S. lawmakers are again sounding off on Mexico's seizing of Vulcan Materials property on the Yucatan Peninsula, and Alabama senators are taking roles in calling out Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, reports AL.com's William Thornton. Now, it was May when a group of senators sent a letter to Mexico's Secretary of Foreign Affairs. Now, the senators from Alabama, Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville, and fellow senators Tim Kaine of Virginia and Bill Hagerty of Tennessee are calling on Lopez Obrador to back off. Last week, the Mexican president announced plans to designate the land and port as a naturally protected area. The senators said in their letter, quote, "The Lopez Obrador administration is continuing to set a dangerous precedent with these actions, undermining the long-standing bilateral relationship between our two countries and eroding international confidence in Mexico's adherence to the rule of law. We remain committed to using all appropriate tools at our disposal to deter the government of Mexico from seizing Vulcan's lawfully owned and operated property and ensure no entity or individual benefits from its theft," end quote. Now, the Mexican president, who has claimed Vulcan didn't have proper permits to extract materials, seized the property in March 2023. He said he'd declare it a protected area if Vulcan didn't take $360 million for the property, which Vulcan estimates is worth $1 billion. Vulcan Materials is based in Birmingham. Former Alabama and NFL defensive lineman Isaiah Buggs faces at least 60 days of hard labor and is losing his rights to possess guns and own cats and dogs after a misdemeanor animal cruelty conviction, reports AL.com's Carol Robinson. Responding to information they received, Tuscaloosa police officers found pit bulls on Buggs' back porch and a Rottweiler mix locked in a metal cage. They said the dogs were malnourished and that the residence, a rental home, appeared to have been abandoned. The district judge sentenced Buggs to 365 days of labor, but ordered him to serve 60 days with the rest suspended pending his behavior. Buggs has faced other charges in Tuscaloosa County, including second-degree domestic violence and second-degree burglary in June. Well, we'd love it if you'd stay with us through this ad break. We're going to be back with Ivana Harinkyu on efforts by Roy Moore and others to get a man paroled after more than a decade behind bars. Today we have back on the show AL.com reporter Ivana Harinkyu. She has been on the show a couple of times previously and wants to discuss a series that she has been doing on the parole board in Alabama and the trend of not really paroling very many people at all. We've swung greatly back to denying parole for the vast majority of folks who are up for it. Ivana, welcome back to the show. You're going to catch us up today on some more stories that you've released in this series.
Thank you, Ike, for having me back. Always good to be invited back, even when I have to twist your arm maybe a little bit to get here.
About this series, and I've always thought that there are these glaring statistics, but the statistics alone really depend on how well we did the sentencing at the front end. If we got it all right at the beginning and could foresee how these sentences would play out, 90% denied might be okay. But you have gone behind the scenes and you have taken some of the anecdotes, some of the real stories, and kind of shed some light on some kind of jaw dropping cases. And you had one you published today about a man who's in prison, and his most recent crime was that he stole something from Lowe's. Can you tell me a little bit about his case?
Right. So his name is Willie Connor, and Willie Connor is serving life in prison. That is life in prison with the possibility of parole. For the technical charge is first degree robbery, but what happened is he shoplifted a nail gun. Now, we could get into the legalese and argue about why that was the charge he got and why that was a charge that stuck.
One of the first things we learn in journalism is the difference between burglary and shoplifting and robbery.
Right. So what happened was Willie Connor walked into a Lowe's, and this is not disputed by anybody. This is something that even at his trial was agreed on by both sides. Everybody agreed on what happened. And also nobody said and nobody argued at his trial. And again, this happened in 2012. Nobody said that he had a gun. Everybody agreed this is a man who walked into a Lowe's store in Foley in South Alabama. He saw a roofing nailer, commonly called a nail gun, that I guess he decided he wanted. He stuffed it down his pants and walked out of the store. Now, some loss prevention workers at Lowe's followed him out of the store and brought him back in. Mr. Connor went back in and with the officers. And when he got in there was a conversation, and Mr. Connor told the loss prevention workers there at Lowe's that he had a gun. Now, the argument has long been that he said he had a gun because he had the nail gun, and he was telling the officers, "Yeah, I did. I got the nail gun. It's in my pants." He reached down
Right,
his pants
right,
to grab it, and also Roy Moore had said that nail gun had kind of slipped down his pants and was pinching him. So he reached down his pants to grab it and pull it up. When he did, the loss prevention workers thought, "Oh, this guy's saying he has a gun. He's reaching for a gun." They tackled him to the ground and quickly realized he did not have a gun. He was not armed. He had a small pocket knife, but he was not armed.
right,
And
right.
that
Understandably.
Right, and that situation ended with Willie Connor signing a statement at Lowe's saying, "I shoplifted a $249 nail gun." The call to police went out as shoplifting, and between then and when it got to the grand jury and then later at trial, that became a first-degree robbery charge. Now, that is what he was convicted of. Again, nobody at trial argued he had a gun. The argument came up more on his statement of saying he had a gun and the belief that the loss prevention agents had. This was something that was talked about at the parole board, but this is also the kind of foundation on which Roy Moore came onto this case. So Roy Moore first learned about the case way back in 2014 when he was Chief Justice for the Alabama Supreme Court. This case came up to Alabama Supreme Court. The justices decided not to review the case, but Roy Moore, again, Chief Justice at the time, he said that they should review the case. And he actually said that again when it came up in 2016. But that is how Roy Moore learned about the case. He wrote a dissenting opinion on it that was pretty well circulated at the time. And he has always argued from that day that this was a legal argument. This was a bad indictment. He should have never been indicted for having a gun because it was a nail gun. It was not a firearm. That is, again, that's a difference in opinion on law because there are people who, again, disagree with that. That has been Roy Moore's position from day one. But regardless, we're at the parole hearing because he was convicted of that charge. He was sentenced to life on that charge. That's how we got to the parole hearing.
So how did it go? Did the parole board, did they seem swayed by Moore at all, or I mean, does he still swings a big stick? I would assume in some legal circles.
I don't want to understate the importance of Roy Moore being there, but I do want to make a note to say that Roy Moore is not the only former Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice to be at the board arguing for parole. And he
Hmm.
actually joins the company of former Chief Justice Sue Bell Cobb. Now, if you know anything about Judge Cobb, Roy Moore and Sue Bell Cobb are on very different sides of the political spectrum. Sue Bell Cobb's a Democrat, and Roy Moore is a Republican. They are, again, very far apart on most issues, but I don't think that it can be understated the fact that both of these people, who are very, very different, are down at the parole board doing the same thing.
Hmm.
And you can argue, I guess, with that again, different cases. Obviously, they're not working on a case together, but they are doing something with the same goal in mind, which is to get people whom they believe to be deserving of parole an opportunity to be released on parole. And I just think that's really interesting that in a world where we can't agree on anything, there are people who cannot agree on the same color of the sky, but we've got two people that are so politically different and different in pretty much every way can agree on the same thing. And that is very interesting to me. And I don't think that, again, that can be understated. Now, to answer your question, how did the board deal with this case? So, Roy Moore did speak. There's only a couple of people who can speak for each side, and each speaker gets 2 minutes. So Roy Moore did take his 2 minutes. And initially, when he described the case, he did not bring up the legal argument. He focused more on Willie Connor's behavior in prison. He had more, I didn't even put this in the story, but he actually had more than a dozen letters of recommendation from people from the prison system who were recommending Willie Connor be let out on parole. He said even the warden at one of these prisons was saying, look, he's deserving of it. Willie Connor has been in the honor dorm, has not had a recent disciplinary record. And that's really what Roy Moore focused on. And then after his speech, one of the parole board members asked how we got to this robbery first degree charge. And that's when Roy Moore explained his legal theory. And that's also when, which is what I expect that you want to hear about, is when the board chairperson, Lee Gwatney, started grilling Roy Moore on the state's robbery statute. And that's just a fancy way of saying what the law actually says. And she just grilled again Roy Moore on that and asked him to recite the code, which is something, again, if you're familiar with the Roy Moore, he's always recited Gettysburg Address, Declaration of Independence, he's always recited
Yeah,
speeches, codes.
right.
So he did. He recited that there at the podium. But the chairperson, Gwatney, kept asking for another part of the law. And the conversation went as she would say, or, and was obviously seeking another clause or another portion of the law that Roy Moore had not recited. So it went back and forth like that for quite a little bit. And it was, again, these two people, these two lawyers, going back and forth on this law, and Judge Moore did not have a copy of the law in front of him to read off. He was just pulling it from memory. So it was very interesting. It was contentious. The tension continued when people from the other side got up, and a member from a nonprofit organization called Vocal, it's Victims of Crime and Leniency. He's also a former prosecutor in the Alabama Attorney General's office, I should note. He got up and said that Judge Moore was wrong about his recitation, and he then argued about the exact wording in the law. So this parole hearing really turned into a 30-minute law class and explanation of the state's robbery statute, and a lot less about what Willie Connor has done in prison and his deserving of parole.
You still have a guy who's up for parole. So did Roy Moore make any headway on that end?
With that particular board member, I don't believe he did.
Yeah.
Chairperson Guatney voted no to
Hmm.
deny parole. She also voted to set it off for 5 years, which is the maximum amount of time allowed by state law. Um,
Wow.
and again, we should note Mr. Connor is 59 years old. But in Alabama, you do not have to have a unanimous vote. So there are 3 parole board members. You only need 2 yeses. And Mr. Connor did get 2 yeses. So board members Gabrielle Simmons and Daryl Littleton voted to parole him. So that those 2 yeses went out, and he will be paroled. They don't have an exact date. They don't tell us that. It depends on a lot of moving pieces, but it's usually within about 4 weeks when a person is granted parole to when they walk out of those doors. Again, barring any other issues.
So that'll be about 11 years in prison for
No, he's
this.
already served over 12 years, actually.
Over
So it'll
12
be
years
almost
already.
13. Yeah, it'll be almost 13 years, actually.
That's a lot of time for a nail gun.
One thing that Judge Moore actually, he explained this both to me personally and to the parole board, is that the nail gun did not have a compressor attached to it. So it wasn't actually a functioning nailer at that point. You would have had to attach a compressor to it for that nailer to have the, I don't know the correct wording here, Ike, but
Right,
the
right.
to be able to shoot the nail into the, I believe that that's an AP style word, but to be able to shoot the nail into the wall or into the tile or whatever you're doing with that. I've never used a nail gun, so I cannot give you any information on that. But it was not connected to a compressor, which would have made it a dangerous instrument.
Where have we seen over the past few months this whole trend? Has it shifted any at all? Are we seeing the the tracks greased with the more attention that's come to the issue?
And this is actually something I covered in a separate story that I published today, which was about family members who showed up at a legislative meeting in Montgomery to say, really to share the horrors that their loved ones have been facing in prison. And one of the things that kept being brought up was parole. And they say, look, my loved one is out on work release and they're earning $2 a day. They are safe. They're deemed safe to work in the communities, and they come home to these horrors at night, or they come back to prison and these horrors, but they can't come home on parole. They keep getting denied parole. How does that make sense if they are safe enough to work in the community, but not safe enough to be paroled? And that was an argument these families made. And the lawmakers who were on the Joint Prison Oversight Committee in Montgomery, they didn't disagree with the families, and they said, look, pardons and paroles, which is the name of the agency there, they said the parole board should be here. And one of the people on that board, a state senator, he said, look, we invited him. Now he did kind of fall on the sword by saying, look, we invited him 30 days ago, maybe that wasn't enough time, I'll make sure to give them more notice for their invitation
Hmm.
next time. But um,
Right.
Republican and Democrat lawmakers who sat on that commission said the parole board needs to be here. They need to hear these things from these family members. They need to hear these concerns, and they need to hear about these horrors that are happening in prison and what not letting people out of prison is doing, and how that bottleneck is really affecting the entire system. So again, you've got Representative Jim Hill, who's a former longtime judge in the state, and Representative Chris England, who an attorney, and also again been in Montgomery and the legislature for a while. He's from Tuscaloosa. A Democrat, a Republican, again, are agreeing on the same thing, that the members of the parole board should have been there to hear these stories. And also, Judge Hill made an interesting comment to say that the legislative branch, he went out of his way to say that the legislative branch of government does not control the day-to-day operations of the parole board, and that the legislature, again, doesn't have control over them. And I thought that was telling, that he went out of his way to say that at a public meeting.
You talk about they're hearing from folks who are related to people behind bars, and how they need to hear that stuff. Well, the public also needs to know also, just so that we can be more informed about what's really going on when we say 90% of folks are denied parole, and we can have a knee-jerk opinion about it, or we can read Ivana's work, and it's been wonderful. You've told these stories.
And I'm going to take I'm going to take my time here on my soapbox, to say I appreciate your kind words, but also you said something that resonates with me, and that is that people need to know about this. And that resonates with me because I have had a flood of emails, texts, phone calls, social media messages that say, look, I don't have a loved one in the prison system. I've never been to prison. I've never known anybody in prison. I had no idea what was going on, Or again, those same words, but say, I've never known anybody up for parole or anybody that was dependent on parole. So people have reached out to say, I didn't know this was how our system worked. Thank you for informing me about it. And now, again, I'm arming you with the information. You can decide what you want to think, but it's really important. And it's sometimes hard for me, and I think us as journalists, to remember that not
That's
everybody
right.
has the same
Yeah.
scope that we do, and not everybody lives in this world. I mean, this is the world that I live in, and these are the stories I hear, and it's second nature to me. But the majority of Alabamians, they don't have that. Again, unless you have a loved one in prison, you don't have that knowledge because you're trying to get up and go to work or provide for your family and then get home, make something for dinner, watch a TV show and go to bed, and or take care of your children, or wrangle a 1-year-old like I am. And it's really hard to have the time to learn about something that you have nobody to tell you about, and you have no direct source of information for. So I think that that's been really interesting, and that's been kind of the a bright side of doing the series, is the amount of people that have just said, look, I'm happy to have this information and to be able to form an educated opinion on it, because I didn't know this information before.
Yeah, and a lot of those people, are concerned. Hey, I don't want a neighborhood, full of ex-felons who shouldn't be out. But you can be law and order and still come to each of these situations with an objective view. And I think people are doing that, and you are helping bridge that gap and doing a great job of it. Can we look for anything else on this topic?
Yes. Now, I know, I think I've said this on this podcast before. This was supposed to be just a little project that I ran in January and ended in like mid February. And here we are going into August, and we're still going. So I am clearly not a good planner at things like this, and don't have a great scope of a timeline. I actually have two stories that are sitting here in my stack of notes. Your listeners can't see them, but you can see this giant stack here. Um, I've got a couple of stories here that I'm working on, so you will see more in the denied package. You can definitely be looking for that.
Okay, we will definitely keep up with that. Thanks for doing that. Ivana, while I have you on here, and folks, I'm blindsiding her with this a little bit. It's Friday already, so we ran into the day where we usually give a quiz for folks, and it's kind of a fun review quiz. Ivana knows it well because she came on. I can't remember what was your score. How'd you do on that?
I got a 100% score a couple of weeks ago. I'm very proud of myself for it. And I also got the opportunity to get on a Taylor Swift, Travis Kelsey soapbox as well. So it was a really good week and a really good episode for me, Ike.
Well, you can definitely put that on your resume, by the way. That'll, maybe you're out there doing these deep dive journalism projects, but you can also mention that you aced our quiz. I'm gonna go over this week's quiz. We'll have it in the newsletter today as well. But Ivana's not technically taking it because I blindsided her with this, but we can talk through it, and I might ask her what she thinks as we go along.
No, I think you go ahead, and this can be a quiz, but you can't count the score against me. This can be like a what do you call it? Like a mock quiz.
All right, that's a good plan. Good plan. I have if it's a mock quiz, it's close enough for me to get the buzzer out in case I don't know. We'll see. If I feel like I need to go to the buzzer,
There's
I'll
a
go to it.
podcast. There's another podcast I listen to aside from the best down in
A
Alabama.
lesser
They
podcast.
a lesser podcast, correct? And they actually they go over different documentaries, and they have a bell, and they call it their garbage bell, and they ring it when somebody does something that they disagree with. So I feel like you're getting the garbage bell out on me.
We need, yeah, we definitely need a garbage bell sometimes. Let me let me call up the quiz so we can go over it. Okay, let's go over it, folks, and we'll just give the audience enough time to think of the right answer. We need to do a call in show. I don't think podcasts do that though. Question number
Oh
one.
gosh, please.
Question number one. A woman who pled guilty to wire fraud was accused of embezzling around $300,000 from a church where she worked as an administrative assistant. According to prosecutors, how did she spend much of that money? We have A, on expensive purses, B, on cars for her kids, C, to buy digital gifts for TikTok content creators, or D, on what is thought to be the largest Stanley Cups collection in the U.S.?
C. TikTok.
Wow, you just jumped right in there. And
What can I say? I have a talent. What can I say?
question number 2. When news of President Joe Biden's decision not to run for reelection broke, former U.S. Senator Doug Jones quickly endorsed who to replace him? Kamala Harris, Joe Manchin, Michelle Obama, or Roy Moore?
That would be A. Kamala Harris.
Going with, think Kamala Harris, because I mean that's where everybody landed, right? On the Democrat side.
I feel like
Yeah,
you're trying to make me second guess this decision, but I'm
I
sticking
am.
with it.
I am. I definitely am. Yeah, he did. Question number 3. This week marked the birthday of Zelda Sayer. I think I'm saying that the right way, who became Zelda Fitzgerald. She was born July 24th, 1900, and has been commonly called America's first what? And the options are flapper, feminist, bootlegger, or influencer.
A. Flapper.
A flapper. How
I'm biting
confident
my
are you
nails
in?
on this one.
So you're not
I'm
extremely
pretty
confident about.
confident. I'm
All right.
pretty confident, but I am also, yay! I did it.
You got that right. She was. They were the big party couple during
I
the.
read a great I read a great book on her. I think it was just called Z. I think. I'm looking around my office. I don't see it
I
in here.
think
I think it was
so.
just
I
called
think
Z,
you're
but it was a
right.
wonderful book on her. Mhm.
Yeah. Question number 4. Who among Alabama's university presidents has the highest base salary? University of Alabama's Stuart Bell, Auburn University's Christopher Roberts, UAB's Ray Watts, or Troy University's Jack Hawkins?
You saved the hardest for last. I believe it's Auburn. I believe it's
This
Auburn.
is,
I think that was B.
you wish this was the last one. This is only the 4th one. Um, no, and
Oh.
I'm so glad I get to use this.
No, no, it's Troy?
No, it's not Troy either. Which Jack Hawkins has been at Troy. They call him the chancellor there. He's been there since
Yeah.
1989. He's been there a while, but he has not caught UAB's Ray Watts, who has the
It
highest
is
salary.
UAB. I did not know that. I am a UAB grad. And I almost said UAB, but I didn't because I thought that was again like a reverse psychology situation going here.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm mad at myself. Oh, okay, fine. Let's that was
The
that was that was
problem,
an ugly one.
a good rule for taking a test that I made up or having any conversation
Mhm,
with me is to not think too
mhm.
deeply. Ray Watts, his base salary, according to our reporting, was $927,737. So that's the highest in the state. It was followed by Alabama, Auburn, University of South Alabama, and then Troy, their presidents slash chancellors. Question number 5. This is the last one. At last weekend's Alabama deep sea fishing rodeo, I know I've mentioned this event so many times over the past week. The winner in the shark category is expected to be certified as a state record for its species. What kind of shark are we talking about? See, the shark that won the shark category is going to be a state record once they, officially confirm it. Great white shark, tiger shark, bull shark, or land shark?
Well, I know. uh, go over what were my two middles? It was Tiger and
It's a,
Bull were the two
it,
middle options.
yeah. This is going to be a
Okay,
guess, so I got my buzzer ready.
this is going to be a guess, but it's going to be an educated guess, and I'm going to go with Bull Shark. I again,
That's
educated guess.
that's a bunch of bull something. Have you ever met a
I
land
should have done
shark?
land shark, honestly. I should
Have,
have
have
done a
you
land shark because
Have you ever seen a land shark?
I have had a land shark.
Oh, you mean the drink. Oh, yeah, that's
Wait,
fine.
was that not
They
the entire joke? I thought that was the joke.
well, they hang out at the local bars and they feed right after dark.
Okay. Well,
We,
yes, I have been a land shark. I have had a land shark. I have seen a land shark. I've done all the things.
I'm gonna put you onto my Spotify playlist, and then we'll get that straightened out. Ivana,
I
thank.
do want to know I do want to know for the record that Ike and I used to work on the same team together, and I at stressful moments would send our team a live stream link that you could watch the beaches from. I believe it was Panama City, so I know we can't say that here on down in Alabama, but he would send us a live cam so we could watch the beach. So I think you owe your viewers that.
It was a spot that I used to go dent the sand every now and then when I lived down there. Ivana, thank you so much for coming on and doing this, for doing the quiz again, for enlightening us on the parole board series that you've been working on. Y'all check that out at al.com. Also, and depending on how the editing goes for this, it may or may not be evident to folks that Ivana has been extremely patient through a few technical difficulties, which she's done with us before. We're appreciative of that. So thanks for
Well,
coming
thank
on
you,
again.
Ike. I appreciate it, and I hate to be your unlucky charm for your tough technical difficulties. Always happy to be it, but hate to do it.
I would love to be able to blame it on you, but I can't. All right, folks. Thanks to everybody for listening to us. We are going to be back here bright and early Monday morning. Until then, as always, y'all come on by and see what we're working on. We're open 24 hours a day and 7 days a week on the World Wide Web at al.com.